On a freezing winter morning in the year 1840, a thick yellow fog, heavy with the soot of coal fires and the stench of the River Thames, clings to the soot-stained brick walls of a massive, imposing building in the heart of London. This is the St. James Union Workhouse, a grim fortress of slate and stone designed not to welcome the poor, but to deter them. Outside the iron-spiked gates, a small crowd of destitute men, women, and shivering children huddles in the gloom, waiting for the doors to open. They are the casualties of the Industrial Revolution, victims of winter unemployment, cholera, or sheer misfortune, who have reached the absolute end of their resources. For them, entering this building is the last choice before starvation. Inside these walls lies a calculated domestic penal colony, governed not by compassion, but by the relentless mathematics of the New Poor Law of 1834. It is a world where poverty is treated as a moral failing, and where every hour is designed to be harder than life on the streets. This reconstruction of a London Union Workhouse in the year 1840 has been created by the History Forge with artificial intelligence based on historical blueprints, parliamentary reports, and records of the period. If you enjoy seeing the lost and hidden spaces of our past brought back to life with historical accuracy, do not miss the journey still to come. The St. James Workhouse, built in the late 1830s, is designed on a radial, Y-shaped plan popularized by the architect Sampson Kempthorne. This layout allows the Master's Tower to look down 3 separate wings, maintaining constant surveillance. The building is surrounded by high brick walls, creating narrow, stone-paved yards that are completely isolated. The windows of the wards are set more than 6 feet above the floor, fitted with frosted glass, so that the inmates can never look out at the surrounding city, but are forced to gaze only at the gray London sky. The construction is of the cheapest local gray brick, lime-washed on the inside to prevent the spread of disease, and the floors are made of cold, unyielding flagstones or damp timber planks scrubbed daily with sand and lime. The rooms are heated only by small, iron-grated fireplaces that struggle to push back the damp chill of the winter drafts. The community gathered inside these walls is divided by a strict and absolute system of classification. Upon entry, the family unit is instantly and systematically shattered. Husbands are separated from wives, mothers from their young children, and brothers from sisters. Each group is assigned to a specific ward. Able-bodied men, able-bodied women, boys under 14, girls under 14, and the aged or infirm. They live, work, and sleep in completely separate parts of the building, sharing no common spaces. Even in the chapel or the dining hall, iron screens or separate seating areas prevent them from catching a glimpse of their loved ones. A mother might hear her child crying in the next yard, but is forbidden under pain of confinement in the refractory cell from crossing the threshold to comfort them. This separation is the core of the workhouse system, designed to break the spirit of the poor and to prevent the breeding of what the poor law commissioners call the pauper class. The humiliation begins at the threshold with the admission process, designed to strip the applicant of their remaining dignity. Met by the relieving officer, new arrivals have their name, age, and former trade recorded in the ledger. They are then ordered to strip naked for a visual inspection. Their own clothes, often ragged, are bundled into paper sacks to be fumigated with sulfur and stored in the baggage room. Next comes the bath. In the winter of 1840, the workhouse bath is a source of dread rather than comfort. Up to a dozen inmates are washed in the same dirty, soapy water, which is only changed once a day to save fuel. For many, this is the first time they have been completely submerged in water, and the experience is accompanied by the harsh scrubbing of the ward assistants. Immediately after the bath, the porter or matron shears the hair of the new arrivals. The long locks of the women are cut short under the pretext of preventing lice, marking them instantly as paupers. The daily administration of this fortress falls upon the workhouse master and the matron, a married couple who rule the institution with military discipline. They are assisted by a small staff of porters, schoolmasters, and nurses, often chosen from the elderly inmates in exchange for slightly larger food rations. The master keeps the punishment book, recording infractions such as swearing, talking during silent hours, refusing to work, or possessing smuggled tea. Punishments range from the reduction of food rations to solitary confinement in the dark, unheated refractory cell beneath the stairs. Above the master sits the Board of Guardians, local ratepayers who meet once a week in the boardroom to review applications for relief, examine the accounts, and ensure that the cost of running the workhouse is kept to the absolute minimum. Daily life begins before dawn at the sound of a heavy brass bell rung by the porter in the central yard. In the winter of 1840, the bell clangs at 6 o'clock. In the summer, it rings at 5. Inmates must rise instantly, make their iron bedsteads, and wash their faces and hands in cold water at the communal trough in the yard, where a single piece of coarse soap is shared among dozens of men. Roll call is taken in the damp yards, where the master inspects the inmates for cleanliness and order. Anyone found with unwashed hands or uncombed hair is marked for a reduction in their breakfast ration. The rule of silence is enforced from the moment the bell rings. No talking is allowed in the dormitories, in the washing yards, or during the morning muster, creating a quiet, eerie atmosphere where the only sounds are the scraping of boots on stone and the coughing of the sick. The food served on the long, scrubbed pine tables of the dining hall is governed by the principle of less eligibility. This doctrine dictates that the condition of the workhouse inmate must be less desirable than that of the poorest independent laborer outside. Breakfast consists of 6 ounces of bread for men and 5 for women, accompanied by a pint of gruel. Gruel, or water gruel as the inmates call it, is a thin, watery paste made by boiling oatmeal in water, seasoned with a pinch of salt. It is rarely served warm by the time it reaches the tables, and its consistency is thin and unappealing. The meal is eaten in absolute silence, under the watchful eyes of the master and his officers, who stand on raised platforms at either end of the hall. After breakfast, the inmates are marched to their respective workrooms to begin 10 hours of hard, repetitive labor. For the able-bodied men, the work is designed to be physically exhausting and economically uncompetitive. A major task is oakum picking, a trade borrowed from the naval prisons. Men sit on low wooden benches in dark, drafty sheds, surrounded by piles of old, tarred ropes discarded by ships on the Thames docks. Using a metal spike called a fid, or simply their bare fingernails, they must untwist the stiff, tar-encrusted strands, shredding them until they become a loose, fibrous mass of hemp. This oakum is then sold back to the shipyards to be mixed with pitch for caulking the seams of wooden vessels. The tar stains the fingers black and splits the skin, while the dust from the dry hemp fills the lungs, causing chronic coughing. A man's daily task is to pick up to 3 pounds of oakum, a quota that requires constant, rapid movement from morning until night. In the adjoining yard, other men are set to stone breaking. Under a small, open-sided shed, piles of large, rough granite blocks are dumped. The men are armed with heavy iron hammers and must break the blocks into small, uniform pieces that can be used by the parish to pave the streets of London. To prevent injuries to the eyes from flying stone chips, some workhouses provide wire goggles, but many men work without them, their faces covered in dust and blood from minor cuts. The work is backbreaking, and the constant hammer-on stone echo fills the yards for hours. For the elderly or infirm men, a lighter but equally monotonous task is bone crushing. Large, dry animal bones from local slaughterhouses are brought in, and the men must crush them into a fine dust using heavy pestles in mortar bowls to be sold as fertilizer. The smell of the decaying bones is sickening, and the dust coats the throat and nostrils, leading to frequent respiratory illness. The women of the workhouse labor in the laundry, the kitchens, and the sewing rooms. In the laundry, they wash the mountain of sheets, blankets, and uniforms consumed by the institution. They work in a room filled with steam and the smell of boiling soap, lifting heavy, wet linen from copper boilers using wooden paddles, scrubbing them on ribbed zinc washboards, and wringing them out by hand. The dampness penetrates their clothes, and in the winter, many suffer from severe rheumatism and chilblains. In the sewing room, other women mend the coarse garments of the inmates or sew simple shirts and aprons for the parish. The work is done under the supervision of the matron, who inspects every stitch. Any woman found slacking or making errors is forced to rip out the seams and start again, often losing her dinner as punishment. For the children of the workhouse, childhood is a brief, heavily regulated interlude. The union is legally required to provide 3 hours of schooling a day, usually taught by an underpaid schoolmaster or schoolmistress, who is often barely more literate than the pupils. In a cramped, cold schoolroom, boys and girls sit on backless wooden benches, practicing simple arithmetic and copying moral maxims from scriptures onto slate boards. The education is designed to be basic, ensuring they do not develop aspirations above their station. At the age of 12 or 13, the boys are apprenticed out to local tradesmen, often as chimney sweeps, shoemakers, or coal miners, or sent directly to sea. The girls are trained in basic domestic service, learning to scrub hearths and polish silver, before being sent out to work as maidservants in middle-class London homes. For these children, the transition to the harsh labor of the Victorian working world is often brutal and brief. Hygiene and clothing inside the workhouse are stripped of all personal identity. Upon admission, the inmates' own clothes are taken away, cleaned and stored in the baggage room, to be returned only if they leave. In their place, they are issued the workhouse uniform. For men, this consists of a coarse gray wool jacket, a waistcoat, corduroy trousers that whistle as they walk, a woolen cap, and a pair of heavy leather shoes fitted with wooden soles. The women are issued a dark cotton dress, a white apron, a woolen shawl for winter, and a simple mob cap to cover their hair. The clothes are designed to be cheap, durable, and instantly recognizable. A person walking through the streets of London in a workhouse uniform is immediately marked as a pauper, exposing them to the ridicule of the public if they are sent outside on parish business. The afternoon meal, or dinner, is the only substantial food of the day. According to the dietary tables of 1840, this meal varies throughout the week. On 3 days, it consists of a small portion of boiled beef or mutton accompanied by potatoes or other cheap vegetables. On the other days, the meal is soup thickened with barley and oatmeal, or a suet pudding that the inmates call sadness due to its heavy texture. The portions are strictly weighed. The cook uses a small brass scale to ensure that no inmate receives a fraction of an ounce more than the regulations allow. The children receive smaller portions, supplemented by skimmed milk. Tea and sugar are luxuries reserved strictly for the aged and infirm, who are allowed a small ration once a week as a concession to their years. Because the workhouse is the only refuge for the destitute, it also serves as the default hospital, hospice, and asylum for the parish poor. The sick wards, or infirmaries, are among the most crowded and depressing spaces in the building. Here, the aged, the dying, the mentally ill, and the infectious are packed into adjacent beds. In 1840, there are no professional nurses. The care of the sick is delegated to elderly female inmates, who can neither read the labels on medicine bottles nor lift the patients without assistance. These nurses are frequently accused of stealing the mutton broth or the medicinal gin prescribed to the dying. Typhus, consumption, and scarlet fever spread rapidly through the damp, unventilated wards, turning the workhouse into a vector of disease. The medical officer, a local doctor paid a pittance by the Board of Guardians, visits once a day, writing quick prescriptions in his ledger and moving rapidly along the rows of iron beds, powerless to halt the mortality that claims dozens of lives each winter. As the sun sets over the London chimneys, the evening bell rings at 6 o'clock, signaling the end of the working day. The inmates are marched back to the dining hall for supper, which is a repetition of the morning meal. A small piece of bread and a pint of gruel. After supper, the chaplain of the workhouse conducts evening prayers, reading passages from the Bible that emphasize obedience, patience, and the moral necessity of labor. The inmates stand with bowed heads, their gray uniforms reflecting the dim light of a few oil lamps hung from the beams. By 8 o'clock in the winter, the bell rings for the final time. The lamps are extinguished, and the inmates are locked inside the cold, dark dormitories for the night. The dormitories are long, narrow rooms lined with rows of narrow iron bedsteads. The mattresses are stuffed with straw or coconut fiber, covered by a single coarse blanket and a sheet. The rooms are crowded, with up to 40 people sleeping in a single ward, and the air soon becomes thick and foul from the lack of ventilation. In the middle of the night, the only sounds are the snoring of the sleepers, the coughing of the sick, and the footsteps of the porter walking his rounds in the yard below. If an inmate falls ill during the night, they must wait until the morning bell rings to report to the medical officer, as the doors of the dormitories are locked from the outside. The winter of 1840 was a period of intense crisis for the working class of London. Known to history as the beginning of the Hungry Forties, it was a time of deep economic depression, high bread prices, and widespread unemployment. The workhouses were crowded to capacity, and the boards of guardians struggled to keep costs down while meeting the demand for relief. It was this very environment that inspired Charles Dickens to write his famous novel Oliver Twist, published in installments between 1837 and 1839. His depiction of the parish boy asking for more gruel shocked the middle-class public and brought the cruelties of the new poor law into the light. Yet, despite the public outcry, the system remained largely unchanged, as the authorities believed that any softening of the rules would encourage laziness and bankrupt the parishes. The bells of the nearby church towers toll the hours through the dark night, their sound echoing over the slate roofs of the workhouse. For the people sleeping inside, the passage of time is marked not by achievements, but by the relentless repetition of the bells, the drums of labor, and the silent hum of the prison-like yards. They are caught in a machine designed to grind away their individuality, leaving only the quiet obedience of the pauper. The system will continue to operate for nearly a century, long after the winter of 1840 has faded from memory, before the workhouses are finally abolished in the early 20th century. Today, many of the old workhouse buildings have vanished, demolished to make way for modern streets, while others have been converted into hospitals, museums, or luxury apartments. The high brick walls have been torn down, and the stone-paved yards are now lawns or parking lots. Yet, the flagstones that remain in the older basements still bear the faint, ratted marks of the iron-soled shoes worn by the thousands of men, women, and children who once lived and labored inside their silence. Each time those spaces are walked again, the domestic civilization of the Victorian poor returns to the light, a reminder of a time when the wealthiest empire in the world built fortresses of brick to hide its own distress.